Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Sean for inviting me to speak this morning. It's wonderful to be here. I'm assuming that you expect this to be better than the first service. I should have ironed out some of the bugs in my message. That's one of the gifts of speaking multiple times on a Sunday morning. You get to get it better this may be like a bowling game. You know, my first game is usually the best one, and everything else is pretty pathetic after that. So no promises. But I am delighted to be here. I've known Sean for quite a number of years and have heard him speak many times and really appreciate his ministry. And clearly you do as well. This feels like a GCU chapel. Holy cow. There's nothing but students in here. How many of you are connected in some way to GCU? So Sean is now campus pastor at GCU, and congratulations, Sean. Well done. So it is a real privilege to be here. So I kind of feel, really, really comfortable being in the presence of so many students I get to see day in and day out. And I'm excited for you to be a part of a thriving congregation of believers in a very important part of the city, to where you get to minister not only to one another in these fellowship opportunities, but your surrounding community. And so thank you for being a part of a fellowship like this. And I'm just trusting that God would continue to bless you. I mean, 4 services, a new campus across town, pretty cool stuff. So it is a delight for me to be here for a couple reasons. One is it is difficult for a pastor during these holidays. Now, Sean didn't ask me to say this, but I'm going to say it because back in my earlier days, I pastored for 12 years in Southern California, 3 different churches. One was a church plant, and 2 others were kind of rebuilds. And I know how difficult it is to be a pastor. And I know he's probably heard multiple times, well, you only work 1 day a week, right? He prepares a message, 6 days, and he delivers it on Sunday, and then he's kind of playing golf and fishing the rest of the week. And I know that not to be the case. And it's even more difficult when you get to the holidays because the regular attenders start traveling for the holidays. They go home to see family and especially students. And so familiar faces are gone, and you have all these guests that come. And there's this certain expectation that the church will deliver, a certain kind of experience during the holidays. And there's a lot of pressure and stress. He may not sense that, but my guess is that it's like, all right, this is just an odd time of the year. I want to make sure that we do what we should as a congregation, but want to get back into the normal life of church life when you get into January. And so this period of time during the year can be very stressful for a lot of different reasons, because it is Christmas, and what comes with Christmas can be challenging in and of itself. But to pastor and lead a flock of people and try to bring teaching from the Scripture in a way in which meets the needs of people week in and week out, especially during the holiday season, just has a burden. So I'm inviting you to remember Sean and his wife, and of course the rest of the staff that serve together here, to make sure that this is a great experience for you when you come here week after week. So I hope that you'll make a mental note. If you don't take anything else away from this morning, please pray for your staff during this unique time of the year. There's great opportunity, but there's also great challenge. So Sean, bless you. For those of you that don't know, there's not very many in here that don't know me, apparently. But I'll just give you a little bio backdrop so you'll appreciate a couple of stories I'm going to share with you here in just a few minutes. I've been at GCU this is my 15th academic year. I never had any intention of going into higher education, especially in administration, when I first started. And so the very fact that I ended up at GCU is pretty amazing to me. The chapter before that, I was for 12 years working in a parachurch ministry that served motorsports, where I served motorcycle racers, motocross and supercross and superbike. I was from Southern California, where all the factories were based, and so all the race teams that were factory-based race teams, Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki, Kawasaki, all that, were based in Southern California. So I kind of stumbled in to some ministry with some motorcycle racers, and that led me into NASCAR, and I was a NASCAR chaplain towards the end of my tour with that organization. And then before that, I pastored 3 churches for 12 years. So I know some of you are saying, man, you can't be that old. But I am. There's no doubt about it. So 12 years of pastoring churches, 12 years in motorsports ministry, and 15 years at GCU. I've got a wife of 42 years as of November the 27th. Yeah. Thank you. Praise be to her for her commitment and faithfulness to us. We've raised 2 boys. They've given us 4.5 grandchildren. So we've got one in the oven. That one's delivered on January sometime. So I am incredibly blessed. And God has been amazingly generous to me over my life. And I use the term generous intentionally because God is generous in a lot of ways, not necessarily in the monetary side of things. If you're a minister, nobody's getting rich. But generous in being able to experience God in so many different ways, in so many different places, in your own life and through the lives of others that you get to lead and be a part of. God is just so generous. And so for those of you that are at the front of your walk with Jesus, if you're just in college, you're young, and you're thinking about, man, what is my life going to look like? Just know God is generous with gifts of grace and blessing, and we'll speak a little bit more about that as this unfolds. But I'm really excited that you are here during this time of the year, and I want to share something with you that's a little bit out of sync with what you've been covering of late, which is the book of Genesis. And so we're going to stay on the theme of Christmas. This is obviously what the season of the year, and I want to speak to that specifically today. Now, most of us are familiar with the narrative around the Christmas story that comes from Matthew and Luke, those 2 Gospels. Mark doesn't speak about the same narrative that Matthew and Luke do. And John drills down, the Gospel of John drills down on the theological impact of the Christmas story. But we, for the most part, when we think of Christmas, we think of, the manger, Mary and Joseph, no room in the inn, shepherds, the star, all of the pieces and elements of the nativity scene on your table at your dorm room or at home that your mom and dad would put out in the front lawn, however you see or remember the Christmas story and the Christmas season and what it looks like quite often. But I think this season sometimes it's easy for us to miss the point of it all. It can be incredibly busy. I mean, right now we've got tubs of ornaments and stuff for Christmas scattered around our house where my wife is decorating. I'm just terrible at decorating, so she's got to tell me, put this there, hang this over there, and do this. And so we're in the middle of all that, and we're kind of late on the game here, so forgive us, but that's just what we're doing. We're in the middle of all the Christmas preparation for that holiday, and then we'll jump on a plane and go back to Tennessee to see our son and his kids for the holidays. So I know for you, Christmas can be a bit like that. It can just race by with all kinds of things to do, buying gifts, trying to make a little bit of extra money so that you can buy gifts, doing a variety of things. And the next thing that you know, you're hoping for it to be January sooner rather than later. Just get through all this. You're tired of fighting with people at Walmart. Blue light specials are not what they used to be. What was the one right after Thanksgiving? What do you call that Friday thing? Black Friday. Nobody does that anymore. Used to make the greatest videos out of Black Friday. I mean, everybody beating each other up for some stupid toy. But that's over now because we all shop online on Amazon. Some of you are buying things right now while I'm talking. I mean, good for you. That's the Christmas season. So I hope that we can, at least for a moment, take a pause and think about what the Christmas season is. During my time before I came to GCU, and it makes no sense, don't ask me necessarily how it happened, that I went from working in motorsports and in NASCAR and ended up in higher education. That is not usually the right kind of track to follow to become on staff at a university, but that's how it worked out for me. When I was working in motorsports, when I started working there, we were living in Southern California, where my wife and I are from, and that's where I got introduced to the sport. I had no background in motorsports. I did not know what I was getting into when I was invited to join the team. My last year as a pastor, I started leading Bible studies with motocross, supercross, superbike riders, and some of you may know a little bit about that sport. I knew nothing about it. I ended up going to a Bible study, and they asked me if I would take over this Bible study, and had all these factory riders in it, and I did not know what that meant. They were the top professionals in that sport. And I was a pastor of a local church, just looking for every opportunity to minister to people, and kind of got invited into this Bible study. And next thing you know, they asked me to lead it, and I thought, all right, I'll lead a Bible study wherever. So as things started happening, I got introduced to motorsports, which I had no background in. And when I went to a race for the first time, it was a spectacle. I mean, literally hundreds of thousands of people, cars or bikes racing everywhere, TV, cameras, personalities, celebrities. It was like, oh my word, what in the world kind of world is this? And so when I first went to work, I was assigned to come to a race here at Phoenix International when I was living in Southern California. And at a NASCAR event, they have what's called a driver's meeting that happens a couple hours before the race actually starts, before they drop the green flag. And so at that driver's meeting, the chaplain would, at the end of it, after they gave rules for the day for that race, then the guy that was the race director would turn to me and he would say, Pastor Tim or Chappie or preacher, whatever they call me, would you close us in prayer? So I closed that driver's meeting in prayer. And then everybody that was at the driver's meeting that wanted to leave and go do other stuff, they'd get up and go out. Those that wanted to stay for chapel would stay in the very same space for chapel. So we'd just do this segue. It would become a secular space and transition into a very spiritual place. It was awesome, incredible. It was a borrowed space. And so the experience of doing that was a real gift. But my first time, I was a volunteer at that particular race. I didn't know what to do, where to go, how to help. And so the driver's meeting and the chapel were in two different locations at Phoenix International back in those days. So there was this building where all the drivers would meet with the crew chiefs and the race director, and they would leave that building and they would go over here to where we had all these folding chairs set up, and it had a sound system where we would do the chapel service. So they had a whole ministry team that would do that, and I'm just there trying to figure out how to help, and I didn't know the routine. I didn't know what needed to happen next. And so I said, well, I don't know, what do you want me to do? They said, well, all the drivers are going to come from this space over here, and they're going to walk through this crowd of fans that were looking for autographs and pictures and to wave at their favorite driver, and they would walk through here to sit over in this chapel space. So Tim, would you just stand here and kind of be bouncer-like, just make sure the fans don't interrupt these guys that we're trying to serve. And so I would stand there kind of like, all right, let's go. Here they come. All right, I don't know who a driver is. I don't know any of them. And so I'm trying to figure out, as some of these guys are walking this way, is that just a fan that looks like a driver? Is that a marketing guy? Is that a driver? I don't know who you are. So if they looked the part, and I don't even know what the part was supposed to look like, and they just gave me a look, I just kind of like, no, all right, you're good. Yeah, you too. All right, they're with you? Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I had no idea what I was doing. And it was just chaos and pandemonium, and I'm thinking, all right, I hope I did my job. And Christmas is a little bit like that. I couldn't help but get that picture out of my mind, because sometimes Christmas is We're just kind of like, there's so much going on. We're just trying to get from there to here. And my role in this is just like, I'm not sure what to do here. And it's just Christmas. And Christmas comes with all the chaos and pandemonium. And I've got to do finals. And I've got to transition to getting on a plane. And I've got to go, to, I don't know, Nebraska, wherever you're from, to do Christmas. And it's just all of that. Let's get into January sooner rather than later. And sometimes Christmas can be that way. We're not really paying attention to what it really means. And I think it's interesting that Matthew gives this long narrative, as does Luke. But Mark just kind of goes, all right, those two guys took care of that information. I'm going to drill down on this. And John, the Gospel of John, takes this very specific, intentional focus in just a few verses, 5 verses that we read just a few minutes ago. And I want to turn your attention to verse 14 of John chapter 1. So, in verse 14, after John has already spoken to some really important theological information in the first part of John chapter 1, where verse 1 he says this, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." So there's a lot packed into that one opening verse in John chapter 1, verse 1. And so when you jump to verse 14, John says this, "And the Word, which we already know is God, became flesh and dwelt among us." That is the point of Christmas, that the God of all creation would take on human form, become a human being, and live amongst us. And John is making that point in verse 14. "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us." That is the whole narrative of Matthew and Luke, and references through the book of Mark. And John says it in a very concise way. "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us." Now my guess is, most of us don't think about that when we're thinking of Christmas. Jesus is a little baby in a manger in swaddling clothes with camels and donkeys and wise men and the star and, the whole story. All of that is a part of the narrative. But do we miss the point that is being made by John, which is, in verse 14, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we have seen His glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth." Now, my wife and I gave birth to 2 boys many years ago. And now it is as much true today as it was back then that we are still proud of our boys. Many times along their years of life, they made some really great decisions, and some of them were really dumb. And they made some hard decisions and difficult decisions that had really challenging consequences along the way. Nonetheless, they were our sons, and we were proud of them. And they were a certain glory to us. So if you start talking about, for those of you that are near my age, talk about your kids, everything within me wants to talk about my kids. If you show me pictures of your grandkids, if you're at that, and not many of you would be close to that, but if that happens, everything within me wants to pull my phone out and start going, "Hey, look at this video. This is better than yours." I wouldn't say it like that. But there's a certain glory and pride that comes with having children and grandchildren. And he says here, "And we have seen His glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father." There's a glory that came with Jesus because He was the one and only Son of the Father, full of grace and truth. We still talk about our kids' exploits in high school and in college and how great it was. And sometimes for them, it's like, Mom and Dad, just give it a rest. That was 5 years ago. That was 10 years ago. That was 15 years ago. That was 20 years ago. But there's sometimes a real temptation to glory in those moments. What they brought to our life experience, what Jesus brought to the experience and existence of God amongst other humans, was that he brought grace and truth. Verse 15. John bore witness about him and cried out. This is John the Baptist, the forerunner of Jesus, his cousin that was born to Elizabeth. John bore witness about him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks before me." So John was born before Jesus was born, but John is testifying that Jesus was before him and outranks him. Some of you are the older sibling. You're maybe the oldest in your family tree. You're going to go home for Christmas, and you are the eldest. And so all the other snotty-nosed cousins and brothers and sisters should look up to you as the older, the elder, the leader amongst all your fellow kids, siblings, cousins in your family. John saying, Jesus came before me and he outranks me. He is the Lamb of God. And it's amazing to me how John identifies who Jesus is in this one phrase where it says, John bore witness about him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, he comes after me." He who comes after me ranks before me because he was before me. John is speaking specifically to the fact that Jesus was the eternal God of creation. He was just not a great prophet, a great philosopher that was to come. John is recording here what John the Baptist said about him is that this Jesus came before me and outranks me. Verse 16, for from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. You know, earlier I shared a little bit of my bio, a quick run-through of the chapters of my own personal professional experience. And it all started when I was 18 years old. I did not grow up in a Christian home. My mom and dad did not know Jesus. And we rode the church bus, my sister and I, and that really never sank the hook. We just, got sent to the curb so that the bus would pick us up and take us off to church. I don't remember a single moment of that experience. I didn't come to follow Jesus until I was 18 years old in my senior year of high school. My parents never talked about Jesus. We never prayed at the table. All my dad's brothers were all convicts or ex-convicts. All the girls in his family were all deaconesses in the Church of Christ. It was so dark from light, it was incredible. So I didn't know where I fit in. I didn't know what any of it meant. I knew nothing about Jesus until I went to church with some friends about your age that had invited me to go to this Friday night youth meeting where I was introduced to Jesus as my own Savior, that he had given his life for me. And I trusted Christ that night. And all of a sudden, my life has shifted from going this way to this way. And the trajectory of my life was this way. And all of a sudden, little did I know how good and generous God would be with me in my experiences in life. That doesn't mean we haven't had financial challenges, health issues, relationship difficulties, raising kids, helping to raise grandkids. It is difficult. Life is difficult. But one of the gifts of getting older is that you get to look back and it gives you a tempered view of all those difficult moments. Where you get to say, man, even in the midst of the difficult things, man, God was good, God was gracious, and he's blessed us with grace upon grace upon grace. Now, I don't know how you see the Jesus of Christmas, the Jesus that became flesh and dwelt among us, the Jesus who is articulated about here by John as being outranking John and coming before, and how all of that kind of resounds in your mind and in your heart, and how does it echo in the chambers of your soul who Jesus is? Because Christmas is really tempting to kind of shrink it down into these little images that are temporary around the holidays, and it really doesn't do justice to who Jesus is and why he came. Verse 17, for the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. So what he brought with him was way more than sometimes we boil it down in the Christmas holidays. And lastly, in verse 18, no one has ever seen God. The only God who is at the Father's side, he has made him known. So Jesus is the one that reflects and gives us a sense of who God is and how he looks. He was the revelation of the Creator God. We cannot look on the Creator of the universe outside of the person of Jesus. He's the one that reveals to us the God of creation. I want to close with this story because I think it's important for me, and it hopefully will be important to you in terms of kind of capturing the opportunity that comes with the Christmas season. This is another racing story, and they kind of stuck in my mind for this morning, and I want to share with you a little bit about a story that happened to me a number of years ago, and it revolved around a personality that I had been a big fan of for years and years at a distance. Now, I was a stick and ball sport guy, not a motorsports guy. So I actually played baseball in high school and in college, and so baseball has always been the sport that I've had the most affection for. And some of you may not know this name. He is called Mr. October. He's a Hall of Fame player. His name is Reggie Jackson. He played right field for the New York Yankees way back in the day. Legendary career. In fact, there was a moment when I was had just graduated high school, and I ended up going to a World Series game and sat on the right field rail when the Yankees were playing the Dodgers at Dodger Stadium. Davey Lopes, who was the second baseman for the Los Angeles Dodgers at the time, hit a game-winning home run, and the fans of Dodger Stadium littered the field with rolls of toilet paper and frisbees and beach balls. You've seen these celebrations before. Mickey Rivers, who was the center fielder for the Yankees, picked up this old tattered frisbee and threw it to Reggie Jackson in right field. And Reggie was right down in front of me, and he picks up this frisbee and throws it into the stands to help clear the field. And I caught this frisbee. And it was like this gift from heaven. And so I caught this frisbee, and I went like this at him, and he looked up it in a Sandlot moment. Have you seen the movie? And he tips his hat. Yeah, that's what I said. Whoa. Like Reggie Jackson noticed me for a moment. I had this orange frisbee that was a throwaway frisbee. Somebody brought it just for that purpose. In case there was a great moment to celebrate, they'd throw it on the field, and I had teeth marks from dogs, chasing it. It was faded on top, but man, it was a treasure to me. And so all of a sudden, I'm doing a chapel service at California Speedway, and we had about 20 minutes to do a chapel service, 5 minutes of music, 15 minutes of message. They had to come in, sit down, we did our deal, then they had to jet out to the grid before the start of the race to be introduced and to get in their cars and start their engines and all that stuff. So one of the guys in the community that was a great friend of mine while I was serving out there, his name was Matt. Matt was a pit coach for Hendrick Motorsports. And after chapel, everybody sat down. The room was packed like this. I did a chapel service. It was over. They got up and they went out to do their jobs for the rest of the afternoon for the race day. So Matt comes darting off from this side of the building, came down the center aisle, and he goes, He goes, Tim, did you see who was sitting right in front of you? I said, no, I didn't see who was there. He goes, Reggie Jackson. And some of you are going, I don't know who he is, but okay, make the story. So I'm sitting there going, Mr. October? And he goes, yes, that Reggie Jackson. And he was sitting right in front of you. You didn't see him? He sat through the whole chapel service. I said, man, that's incredible. Reggie Jackson was in the chapel. I got to preach to Reggie Jackson. So a few minutes later, I go out, and Matt and I are talking about that. He says, man, we start talking about some baseball memories, Yankee memories, World Series memories. And so I walk out to the grid, and they're doing all drivers' intros at the start-finish line, and I'm over by the cars that are lined up on the grid. And so the drivers are going to be introduced, jump in a truck, go around, wave at all the fans, get out of the truck, go get in their cars, strap in, put their helmet on, start their engines, and go racing. So they're out there doing all the driver intros, and I'm over by the cars, and here comes Reggie walking down the grid. I could see the gait. I knew his walk from all the times I'd seen him on TV. And I'm like, wow, here comes Mr. October. So I leaned away from the car, and I kind of stood out there so he could see me, and he saw me. And it was like, oh, he recognized me from doing chapel. So he kind of veers over my direction. I stick out my hand, and I said, Reggie, my name's Tim. He goes, man, it's nice to meet you. I said, thank you for being in chapel this morning. He said, thank you. I enjoyed it. I said, you know, you and I met many years ago. And he looked at me like, oh? And I said, but I don't have time to tell you the story. I chickened out. And so he kind of looked at me like, all right. So have a great day. So he walks off, and I'm like, oh, man, did I ever miss the moment? I just missed the moment. You see the point here? You see what Christmas is? Christmas is a moment that we can miss if we're not careful. It can be right in front of us. Who Jesus is, what he is about, why he came. And yet we can just miss the moment. We can look right past it and not even see it. So my prayer for us this morning is that we would recognize who he is. And I want to sum it up in 3 brief points. Number 1, Jesus glorifies God. He is the glory of the eternal Creator. Number 2, Jesus is the eternal God. He is not some great prophet that lived 2,000 plus years ago and came and has some interesting teachings. He is the eternal God in the flesh. And lastly, he is the one that gives us a clear visual sense and understanding of who the God of creation is. His kindness, his love, his mercy, his resilience, his commitment, all those things that we know about the life of Jesus is who God is. His faithfulness to love in the moments when we're the most unlovely, that is who God is. And Jesus reveals him to us. So my prayer for us this morning is that we would not miss this Christmas. We would not miss Jesus in this moment. Would you pray with me? God, as we pause for this time, I pray for my brothers and sisters and friends that may be here that have never taken the time to think, maybe even just this morning, about what this Christmas is going to be for them. And I'm praying that you would call our hearts and our minds to pause for a moment, to stop and think, to revel in this moment of what Christmas really is. What it really reminds us of is that you humbled yourself to take upon flesh, to become one of us for this moment to accomplish your purposes on our behalf. God, there may be those in this room that have never trusted you. I'm praying that they would come to a place where they would invite you into their lives and they would make that commitment to follow you. God, draw those to you. Lord, mostly I pray for my brothers and sisters today that we would not miss this opportunity to think and consider in the middle of a very, very busy season who you are, Bless my friends here in this room as we pause for this moment to make decisions and think about what you are drawing us to consider. For we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.